Truth is setting us free. This is a podcast for those of us who want to be set free. Is that you? The basis for most religions is the practice of spiritual principles. However, in the name of religion, wars are being waged across the planet. The intention of this podcast is to take a step above religion by creating a personal relationship with Spirit, or the God of your understanding. These are some of the principles that are setting me and others free. Principles like peace, joy, gratitude, acceptance, patience, tolerance, forgiveness, compassion, and empathy, just to name a few. See if you can identify yourself in the stories that follow and how some of the most inspirational people in my life are practicing these principles and being set free. See if you can be set free through the practice of spiritual principles. I invite you to enjoy what follows. So thank you for joining me today for this discussion. I'm grateful that you can participate in a spiritual discussion on gratitude. Gratitude is one of the highest expressions of love that I've recognized in my own life, and believe that it is one that continues to guide and direct me into places that are for my best and highest good. So, first of all, could you introduce yourself so that people know who they're speaking with, the spiritual light that you are?
Yeah. Oh, thank you. So I'm Damali Robertson. My pronouns are she, her. I like to say that I'm a diversity, equity, and inclusion practitioner. I am a student of life, a spiritual being, and so many other things, including an emerging filmmaker. And I have a walk with faith that I think is not unique. You know, each of us has our own separate walk with the universe. And, but mine, I think, has taught me a lot. Like, I've come to a place where I feel like my spiritual life is continuing to expand in ways that support me, but also in a lot of ways, the lessons I've learned have come to support me and supporting others. So I recently became a practitioner at Heart and Soul Center of Light, which is part of the Centers for Spiritual Living. And in a lot of ways, my connection there feels rooted in ancient wisdom teachings. And in a lot of ways, that's who I am, and whose I am as a student of the ancient wisdom teachings that probably started with my ancestors. And yeah, I think that's a little bit of me.
Thank you, Damali. So I want to start with a brief definition of the spiritual principle of gratitude. And it says a feeling or expression of appreciating and giving thanks towards the blessings received in life. That is a definition of gratitude. And is that something that you would agree with, or is there more that you would add to that?
Great definition. I think coming into this conversation, the one thing that was up for me a lot was the feeling that I know, the thoughts I know that people could have about gratitude in all things. Your definition talks about the blessings of life, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of what I've come to understand about gratitude is that it's also powerful in the seasons of life that seem to be hardest. It's
Okay.
also powerful is in the seasons of life that seem to be filled with tribulation. So what I would add potentially to that definition is gratitude can also be a resource in navigating some of the hardest moments in life.
I like that. Um, what are examples of things you are grateful for in your life?
Just about everything. So I have to go back to a moment at Heart and Soul when Reverend Dr. Andriette Earl was talking about gratitude, and I wasn't feeling very grateful that particular day. I was
Right.
feeling very down that day. And she said, find something to be grateful for. Find a couple things, 3 things, 10 things. She started like saying, get a list together, like right now. And I was like, I can't find anything. I was sitting in my seat saying, I cannot find anything. And she said, you're breathing. What about that? Start there. And so when you ask that question about what am I grateful for, the truth is, Maurice, I have become grateful for it all. I
Uh-huh.
am grateful that I woke up this morning. I am grateful that the lights are on in the space that I'm in. I am grateful that I had food this morning. I got a chance to meet up with a friend this morning, right? So I'm grateful for all of those things. And in the moments when, for example, something really hard is happening, I go back to being grateful for the simplest thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm here and I'm feeling. I can feel the sadness. And in that, I find some gratitude that I can feel or that, so I'm grateful for it all.
Uh-huh.
And I love the question because it takes me back to that moment when I felt like there wasn't anything and I still was able to find one thing.
You know, being a part of a spiritual community and having teachers who have suggested different techniques on how to connect with gratitude. One of the things that was suggested to me many years ago, because I did have a clinical diagnosis of depression, and what has helped me is something that I never dreamed would have been a tool or an instrument to get me back into gratitude, and that was to create a gratitude list. People kept saying to me over and over again, create a gratitude list. And I've created a list, Damali, that it is 5 typed pages long now, and so I get up sometimes not feeling grateful. And all I have to do is access my list. And before I am through the first page, gratitude has returned. The feeling of gratitude returns. But I also think that gratitude is an attitude. And
Mm.
so I have another question that I think might bring more out um, as we each examine gratitude. How does
Mm-hmm.
practicing gratitude affect mental, physical, and spiritual health?
Mm. Big question. So here's the thing is I want to always be mindful. Like you mentioned, having this clinical diagnosis, having a clinical um, diagnosis, I think is the appropriate word of, depression, was it? Did you say, Maurice, that you were
Mm-hmm.
having in the past? Okay.
Yes.
So I want to, because, there's a world where people feel that bypass is what we're saying when we talk about gratitude, where we're saying, not to actually attend to these diagnoses. And I want to just, like, first of all, lay the ground that is not what I would ever be saying. That I think that we must tend to the things that are up for us. And so when you ask this question, it's a huge question because, for me, when my dad passed away in 2022, I felt a very dark period. Like, I felt like my life was extremely dark. For especially the first 6 to 9 months of it, I felt like, the world was kind of caving in on me. And if someone would have come to me and said, well, just be grateful, I might not have responded in a very, very kind way. So, like, I want to just be clear that I am not saying to anybody, like, oh, like, don't feel your feelings the full, and don't be with your diagnoses and the things that are really up. And where I got to at a certain point with my dad's passing was gratitude in steps. So, for example, I got to a place where I could really spend time in gratitude for the years that we shared.
Yes.
Where I could really, like, be with the fact that I had this incredible human being as my dad for 50 years. And that would wake me up with some smiling, some, like, that warm feeling in my heart again. So when I think about being at your lowest on your, like, mental health, your kind of that sense of well-being, I do see that sometimes a step, whether it's a memory that feels like warmth and that you can find gratitude in that, or whether it's I'm alive, I'm awake, the sun came up this morning. I feel like those things can be steps that support you as you go to therapy, as you seek grief support, as you see your psychiatrist, as you take medication. I think those things, the little stepping stones of gratitude, can support the overall health and well-being. I hope that answered the question.
It did. Yeah, we're looking at the mental, the physical, and the spiritual health and how gratitude affects those things. And I think that was a really good answer. It leads to another question, however, and that is how to shift a perspective of lack towards thankfulness without minimizing the experience.
Yeah. So, okay. So I'm going to step away from the things like grief and mental health. I'm going to step away from, like, the huge things, and I'm going to move into something like my finances. I'm going to move into something a little bit more practical. And that I think is relatable for a lot of us, right? So what I've learned as a principle around the gratitude with that is if I feel like I would like $1,000, like I would, maybe there's some goal I have financially, and it's like $1,000 would be really supportive of me right now, right? One of the things, and if I only have $1, right? Seriously, this is my practice. I look at that dollar with gratitude. I begin to think to myself, I'm really grateful for this dollar, and there's a practice that I've done before where it's like, I'm actually grateful for all the dollars that I've received over my lifetime. I begin to think about the fact that, my life has been supported in seen and unseen ways, without my necessities being met. And even in times when things were really challenging, there was some supply working in my life. And so I do take a moment to give thanks for that. I give thanks for that dollar, that $1 right there in front of me, because there's something to me that I've learned about the law of vibration, your vibrational frequency, that if you can find the gratitude for that dollar, there is something I believe metaphysically, which is beyond the physical realm, that then allows for $2
Mm-hmm.
and $10. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, but you're not doing it to get $10. You're not being grateful because oh, if I'm grateful, I can get $10. I think I'm grateful truly. And that true sense of gratitude does something to ripple out that to allow for the $10 to come in. I hope that, so like in my life, that is the practice. Be grateful for what is.
And so it's the energy that is generated as a result of seeing that dollar and seeing how it's connected to all the prosperity and abundance that you have in your life. That is what really brings you out of lack and into a sense of well-being. That's what I'm hearing. Would you say that's true?
Yeah. And, as we're having this conversation, what keeps coming into me, for example, is the structural ways that so many people are often found in housing insecurity, food insecurity, like joblessness. There's some stuff that's really structurally present in our society, right?
Uh-huh.
And so I want to name that, and I want to be sure that everyone within the sound of our voices understands that there is no punishment. There is no, like in this that I'm talking about, there is no blame for anyone who might be experiencing, you know, this reality of food insecurity or housing insecurity, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the very list that you talked about, the gratitude list,
Mm-hmm.
could be a starting place, right? Like a thinking about what can I find in my life to pour some gratitude on. So
Mm-hmm.
whether it is I have $1 and I just want to say, I'm so grateful for this dollar and feel the energy of that, or it is, I have had caregivers or community show up for me. And I'm grateful for that. So wherever a person can find the that path of gratitude, like for people, for community, for the material dollar in
Mm-hmm.
their hand, I think it's a step, that goes against the other energies at work. So that, this gratitude thing is so massive, Maurice. It's huge. And at the same time, I think a lot of spiritual teachings can be conveyed as, some kind of like insensitivity to things that people are experiencing. And so I want to be sure that the conversation comes across with like, no matter what is happening, this is not dismissing the structural things. And each of us has a power to activate gratitude. And I think in my own life, in my own walk, when it's been the darkest, even financially, when I've been able to say, yeah, I have all of this debt, and right now I have $50 in my bank account. Thank you for that $50, source. Source, you are the infinite supply. I know that if I keep feeling this gratitude, something will continue to move.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I love that term you use, pouring into the circumstances and situations, the feeling of gratitude, pouring into. I can just visualize that. I know that you also have a film project that you're working on right now and have been raising money to support that project. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm seeing it, how the way that you're structuring it and talking about the energy of gratitude, that is what I imagine is being poured into the circumstances as it relates to this new film project.
Mm-hmm.
I also like the idea that it's not transactional. You know, um, when you give, the expectation is that more will be given to you, but it's not the giving in itself, it's the energy of giving that creates the opportunity for uh, that window to open, so to speak,
Mm-hmm.
the blessings to pour out. What are tangible markers that indicate or are indicators of a grateful life?
Mm. I think some of the tangible markers that I've seen are the way things flow. So let's take the film project for example.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I thought I want to raise money because I want to do this film and I don't have the capital at the moment. At the moment I didn't have like what it would take. So I was like, okay, but I know that, there's an abundance of money in the world. Let me begin, right? So I just started. I just said, here, friends, here's what I'm doing. And I would see the flow working, right? I just put the message out and there would be money. But on top of money, there would be other things that would come in. And the marker of I think this life of gratitude and the way it works is that when you're in the flow of gratitude, you recognize that everything isn't going to come the way that you necessarily expect it. So that other things will flow in. So I have people flowing in. I have had organizations flowing in, like with grant opportunities or fiscal sponsorship. The only grant that I received actually is going to gift me mentorship, is going to gift me equipment. So it's not money as much as it is other things that are going to feed and pour into this project. And so for me, when I see that kind of thing at work, when I see the fact that I started this with an inspired idea, that's it. And from there, one inspired idea led to another one. And as I kind of developed, kind of like stepped in the direction of the idea, it just kept going. It kept flowing. And money was one avenue, but so many other things. And then somewhere along the line, I thought to myself, well, how am I giving this back? How am I repaying this? How am I like being sure that the universe knows that I'm grateful? So one of the women that I talked to for my film leads this amazing nonprofit organization called Hey in Atlanta. And I thought, well, let me send a message out and ask people to give to Hey. Ask people not to give to me, but to give to another organization. And in a lot of ways, that's unheard of in fundraising. Like in a lot of ways, people who fundraise don't believe that you should ask for somebody else. But it was clear to me that that's what I wanted to do because it felt to me like, well, I want to be sure that I'm continuing this flow. And I think that's to me, when you're in the flow in your life, and so that's health, relationships, in all the ways. It's not just about money. Money is just one of the ways. But when you're in the flow, I think that's a marker of a life filled with gratitude, personally.
Wow.
And that doesn't mean hard things don't happen when you're in the flow. That doesn't mean in the last 3 months, I've had some significant things happen. Cars get broken into, cars stop working, things. So I just, like to me, it's like, I don't want anyone to think that what I'm saying is life is going to be perfect.
It's
You
not.
know, it's still going to have challenges. Things are still going to happen. And,
Yes.
and I'm just scratching the surface. They're hard relationship things. Things have been happening in all ways. And I can still feel the flow. And I can still feel that everything is happening to teach me something, to support my growth, to support my like what do I need to know about this? So when all my cars stop working, what is that I need to know? But not to lose that thread of gratitude. Hope that makes sense.
I understand. Um, Here's another question. How can we positively impact our community through an attitude of gratitude?
There are a couple things that come to mind. I talk about heart and soul a lot because it's been such a transformative space for me.
Uh-huh.
But like one of the things that I know that I've heard said time and again at Heart and Soul is don't go evangelizing Heart and Soul. Go tell people to come to Heart and Soul, because in that kind of missionary, let's go gather people to come to Heart and Soul. But how can you be a demonstration of what life is like at Heart and Soul, so much so that other people are going, ooh, what's that? What's that you doing? Let me come get some, right? And the thing is, that's what I think about the gratitude, the attitude of gratitude in our communities. It's not so much to tell people we're grateful or to be like, well, you need to be grateful. So let me show you how to do it. It's your life should, I think, in my mind, be a demonstration. Like you walking into a room, people go, huh? And when you say, because for example, at work, a lot of times my signature line, like when I end the email, it says in gratitude. And I know people are probably like, what is she talking about? And a lot of times I sign it that way in moments that I'm having a challenging exchange. There are times when I sign it that way because I really am just really filled with gratitude for this person. But a lot of times it's a reminder to me to hold on to my gratitude.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I try to show that in different ways. The way I show up, the way that I speak to other people, the way that my connection comes through. And my thought is that in that, I'm building a little bit of, oh, that's interesting. I wonder what that is. And, so other people might want to come along. So I think, yeah, that's one way. And I think spreading it, like being grateful and showing up as grateful, also, I think has that way of rippling.
I think the people that will hear this discussion will really benefit from that idea, being the example, walking the talk, recognizing the power of showing up in the community, even when situations and circumstances may be challenging, and
Mm-hmm.
attitude of gratitude. I think that is such an important opportunity, really, for people to see and then ask the questions, how did she get to be that way? What is she doing, in her own life that gives you that strength and power under the circumstances? I'm grateful that you are sharing that in this discussion, and we'll have an opportunity for people to hear exactly what it is that you're doing, as far as um, challenging situations. What challenges arise when trying to cultivate a practice of gratitude?
Every challenge. I'm glad you're asking this question because I wanted to come back to say something about the challenges because every challenge. So for example, the work that I'm doing, like on my film project is looking at how faith and spirituality can support us in ending racism, colorism, and oppression, right? Which is like a huge thing. And I did a podcast recently about the topic. Someone, we went there. We talked about racism. We talked about capitalism. We talked about all these things. And when he put it out there, he posted it and did the whole tag me and everything. There were so many negative comments. People were really rude. People were really There are people who clearly racism is their thing. They feel good about it. So me presenting this idea that we should end it was threatening. And so there was a lot of kind of like stuff. And so I had a hard time. I want to say that we are gonna have sometimes hard times finding the gratitude because we're gonna be I was just pissed for a moment. I was just like frustrated. Had anger because the whole foundation of racism, it just feels so antithetical to love and light and gratitude. So I had like a moment. But the thing is, a teacher of mine once said, her name is Ainania Ayodele, and she once said, take 5 minutes. Take 5 minutes to be really angry, and then bring yourself back. And so I took the 5 minutes, and that's my proverbial. It could have been a day, but I took some time to be angry, to be pissed. And then I thought, well, first of all, it's good to know. It's good to know where people are with some of these topics. So thank you for the information, for knowing where some people are. And then it's also good to know where I am.
Yeah.
And that my life has a calling on it to do this work. And so that no matter where they are, I'm going to be where I am because this is where I'm supposed to be. I'm grateful that this is where I'm supposed to be. And I'm clear about that. And, that's a different place to come from.
Yeah.
Even for me, in the face of this, this appearance of opposition, to stand firmly in what I know. And that is a place of gratitude. I mean, so it's not easy all the time, but it is simple.
Mm-hmm. And, one of the ideas that you were talking about, especially that around colorism, that has been a challenge for discussion in our own community, let alone outside of the community. So, what I'm really understanding is that authentic gratitude is something that comes from within rather than the experience of how other people are experiencing you and what gratitude looks like from the outside. It's what's on the inside that's really the most important, starts within. What skills or behaviors are required to generate true gratitude?
I think one of the biggest things that has led me to a place of true gratitude is releasing blame, releasing resentment and bitterness, releasing unforgiveness, and releasing any idea that I am a victim. And I say that again, and I want to be clear on that if a crime is committed, you do have a victim, right? If somebody robs you, I really don't want anyone to take it as like I'm saying there's no such thing as these kind of constructs, because we live in a world where these are the constructs. And if something happens to you, there's a perpetrator and a victim, and I also come out of the world of being an advocate for survivors of sexual assault. So the terminology in that space has shifted from victim to survivor. And so in a lot of ways, what I'm inviting people into is to think about in life, in the things that are happening in our lives. So whether that is like, and I'll take myself, having a lot of student loan debt, for example. I had my own student loan debt. I had my children's student loan debt. So I'm just going to use it as an example. There have been times when I've looked at my relationship with loans, or like a student loan, for example, and felt like a victim of the student loan cycle, capitalism and the way that it works. And I felt deep in my soul that I'm a victim of this. And what I've started to think about is more repositioning myself as someone who, made a decision to take student loans based on where we are. This is the society I live in. I made this decision. And based on the fact that I made the decision to take the loans, well, I know that I can find a financial strategy that's going to support me in repaying them. And I'm also aware that some amazing things can happen and, they could get wiped away, right? So, but my point is, I have let go of the decision to be a victim in that, as just an example. I have let go of this idea that somehow I'm a victim because I feel like the energy of that would not serve me. I think that if I hold on to the energy of, well, here's a choice I made and the universe is abundant. And so whether it's going to be me paying it all off in a couple of years, or whether it's, something the government's going to do to forgive, whatever it is, it's going to be okay. And it was a choice I made based on the information I had. Here we are. Let me move forward with that instead of feeling like the weight of the world is on my shoulders around this. Now, again, I say that from a place of understanding we're all at different places with that. So people who are student loan borrowers all have different ideas about this.
Mm-hmm.
And so if somebody is in that feeling of I feel like a victim of this, I think that's something to notice and to decide, that might be what they would like. That's the decision for them. But for me, I've decided that it just is not something that I want to carry with me, is this idea that of victimization in anything, because then I feel like I have more power to decide what happens next, if that makes sense.
I understand.
Okay.
How does understanding the power of gratitude help reduce stress?
Because I think, okay, and again, I think when I choose gratitude, when I let go of the victim in all things, and I choose either what is the lesson I need to learn, what is the thing that the universe would like to offer me, where can I find gratitude, the body eases. The literal physical body shifts, right? And if I go back to something like debt, I have had family members who have had significant debt, which compromised their health and well-being. And I could see the way the weight of that debt was really playing a heavy role on their mind, body, spirit, and on the body itself, and even the cognitive functioning of the mind. And when I think about that, and I think about all the fear that they felt, I think to myself, there's a reason everything is connected, and stress is such a heavy part, plays such a what's the word I'm looking for? It plays such a significant part in what's happening in us.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we choose gratitude, or we choose to look at something as, okay, yeah, I see that this is but what can I do? For example, maybe I'm not going to answer the call. Maybe I'm not going to talk to the bill collector every single time they call, because I understand that this is adding to my stress. So maybe what I'm going to do instead is maybe once a week, I'm going to talk to them, and then I'm going to write, a journal entry about the feeling. And then maybe at the end of that, I'm going to find one sentence of something to be grateful for. So I'm going to find, I had a meal today. So at the end of whatever I'm reflecting on about this feeling, maybe what I'm going to do as well is say, thank you, for the fact that, I had this piece of chocolate today. And that is just the one thing I can find to add a layer of gratitude into something that is a very hard situation.
I've really benefited from nature as it relates to stress reduction. One of my favorite places, as you know, is a marina where I can go walk, sit. I can see the skyline from where I'm sitting of San Francisco and Oakland and all the bridges. There's this fresh air that floods into the marina, and it's always 15, 20 degrees cooler than it is anywhere else. Lots of trees, flowers, and even animals.
Mm-hmm.
I love being in nature. And it's only 10 minutes away from where I live, which is in definitely an urban area that is congested. But at the same time, I have this opportunity. At night, as you know, I'm a late nighter. And part of the reason is because it is quiet.
Mm-hmm.
It is my time to communicate with spirit. And it's where I get in contact with my creative energies. And I also noticed that when my stress levels are down, it opens me up to possibilities above and the things that I might be able to see. Stress turns out to be a distraction from what my best and highest good is. And I get an opportunity to see past the effect of the stress when I am actually meditating and praying, and listening to music. Some of the music, I think music is universal language, and it gives us the ability to speak to each other because it carries energy. And after all, that's what we really are, aren't we? Physical beings, but it's the energy within us that animates these bodies. How can one leverage feelings of gratitude to push through negative states of mind?
Yeah. So first of all, can I just go back to something you said about nature? I think that's, people sometimes think that everything has to be purchased or, the gratitude journal. I have to get the chocolate Damali just talked about, and I want to decouple gratitude from anything that's a transaction. So your point about nature, I think, is an exceptional one, because what I've sometimes done is just step outside in the sun. So wherever I am, just maybe out in front of my house, in the back of the house, just step outside and feel the sunshine and take in the moment of what that means to be connected, to be present right there, no matter what's going on. And I have a garden that I'm beginning to cultivate. And sometimes I can just feel a deep connection to the earth and the infinite gratitude that brings just by seeing a seedling come up and bloom. So your point, I think, is that we have access. So no matter what is happening, that silent moment, taking 5 minutes in silence to just breathe and to notice the rise and fall of our chest is another way to tap into gratitude for just the present moment. So thank you for bringing in that component around nature. And so I just wanted to circle back to that. And then your question about leveraging gratitude, and especially, in life, as I've been saying, and a couple of my friends have been saying, life be lifing. So when life is lifing and there's so many things to deal with, How, your question about leveraging gratitude. And I think what I have done, Maurice, and I know it can look different for everyone, but what I have done to leverage gratitude is to stop myself when I'm beginning to spiral. So the first thing when I'm beginning to spiral, and I can begin to spiral, for example, I had a scenario last week where I was getting a lot of phone calls about something happening with one of my children. So I was getting all these phone calls. People were asking me to respond quickly to things. And it was a kind of frightening moment. And so what I did quickly is I just stopped. So I started to feel myself get really anxious. And then I just stopped and I did that breathing. And I basically turned within to source. What would you have me do? Right. And then, in that, even in those moments where things start to spiral, I could feel myself calling on my spiritual tools, prayer, community. And I could feel myself feeling grateful to have a community to call. And so there was a moment of, you know what, I'm so grateful that I have a toolbox where I can call on prayer. I'm so grateful that I have a community that I can reach out to say, would you pray for me or with me? And that little sensation of gratitude really did support me in moving the feeling from like super fear-based to like that sense of all is truly well, that, I know that whatever is happening, there's some purpose that that's happening for a reason. And in some way, at some point, will come to serve myself and the other folks that were involved. And so, it's just the moment, the noticing, the decision to call on something, a tool to pull on something, and then to feel some gratitude at the center of all of that, even as life is happening.
I love that breath. That is the centering point for me, because I'm understanding that life happens right now, in this moment. And when I'm focused on things that have happened in the past and things that I believe will happen in the future, I'm angry about the past a lot of times and disgusted with some of the ways that I may have responded to life in the past. And when I'm projecting into the future, I'm projecting into fear, because I'm taking what I experienced in the past and projecting it into the future, and creating all kinds of scenarios where things fall apart. And the resource that you just mentioned was just to take that breath and recognize that in this moment, all is well, regardless of the circumstances and situations around me. I can tap into that place that has never been harmed, never changed, has always been and always will be in that moment. And it gives me the perspective that is necessary for me to recognize what the next steps are as they present themselves in the moment. Because a lot of times when the fear comes up, like I said, I have projected some outcome that is not favorable. And most of the time, those things never happen.
Mm-hmm.
In what moments are forms of expressed gratitude improper?
Can you repeat that question for me, Maurice? Say that again.
In what moments are forms of expressed gratitude improper? Or
Improper.
yes,
Mm-hmm.
are there?
Yeah. I do think there is that feeling that people have sometimes that you're bypassing what is happening, their experience. And instead just throwing some gratitude on everything. So, and I feel like that can be improper in the sense that empathy, really seeing another person has a place,
Uh-huh.
and I think, for example, of a couple friends of mine who are chaplains who say that, they're chaplains at local Bay Area hospitals, and they see all kinds of things and they experience all kinds of in their like chaplaincy. They meet and what I call companion people through a lot of hard moments and grief. And someone in a moment with someone else who's experiencing so much sadness and grief, it would be inappropriate, I think, to try to be like, well, be grateful. Like, no, like allow people to have their feeling,
Yes.
right? Allow each of us to come to gratitude if we're going to come to it our way, so I've learned my way, and I enjoy my way. I feel like my life is full because of my own way. And I have two young people in my life, 22 and 25, my children, who just shake their heads sometimes. What are you talking about? What are we trying to be grateful for now? And so there are times when I have to even pull myself back and think, well, I have to allow them to have the feeling that they have. I have to allow them to come to gratitude if and when they do, and respect that they have a different path and they're going to come to. And it took me a long time. I'm 51. I wasn't always feeling this way. So I had my path. So I think anything that projects on someone how they should be can be improper.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And gratitude is a process.
Right.
You don't arrive necessarily in that place based on the person who is expressing gratitude and the people who are experiencing what might be a tragedy in their own lives. And it's a process. We call it the grieving process. And the first part of that process is the denial and
Mm-hmm.
anger, the lack of sensitivity to maybe the people around you. It's hard to say to someone who is experiencing a loss what might be the appropriate thing
Mm-hmm.
in that moment. And
Right.
totally see what you're talking about and how difficult it might be. Sometimes there are just no words.
Right.
And the most that we can be is just present
Exactly.
with that person, with whatever feelings they may be having in the moment, and letting them know that they're not alone.
Exactly.
I am really enjoying this conversation. How
Me
does
too.
how does practicing gratitude construct suitable foundations for life to bolster confidence? How does practicing gratitude construct suitable foundations for life to bolster confidence? So we're talking about gratitude and confidence. How
Mm.
are they related?
Yeah. I feel like gratitude is connected to self affirmation. I feel like gratitude has been in my life connected to self acceptance and self love. Um, because when I could look in the mirror and say to myself, I'm grateful for you, I'm grateful for your journey, I'm grateful for everything you ever perceived as a failure. And I had many that I had once kind of beat up on myself and perceived myself as a failure in many ways. But I came to a place where I could say it and look at myself and say, well, I'm grateful for every lesson, everything that, was yours to have. And that included the perceived failures. And that self acceptance, self love, and ability to look at myself with gratitude supported my confidence.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there were times when I would walk into rooms, and when I say rooms, I'm just using that, but I mean spaces. Like, it doesn't matter where it was, where my head was down and my shoulders were this way, and I was like in the space feeling like I didn't belong there, I didn't have any value there. What was I doing there? And that was the feeling I had of me. And because I think I've had this journey and this self acceptance, and along with like, oh, I'm grateful for it all. I'm grateful for the entire journey. Like when I was flat on my face, when I was like making some of the choices that, people would be like, what did you do? Yeah. When all of that came forward to support me and I could name it, it gives me more empathy. It gives me more compassion for other people and for myself. It gives me more ability to forgive myself and others. It does all these things to serve me. Well, then I'm grateful and I'm more confident in me. I'm able to hold my head up, walk with my shoulders back into just about any circumstance in my life now, which has not always been true. So I do see the two as connected.
Mm-hmm. And for me also, I'm seeing how when I consider myself having made a mistake, if I'm able to learn from whatever that mistake is, and I love how Sinister Spiritual Living looks at it as a um, mistaken thought that needs to be corrected rather than a sin. Because sometimes when I think of sinning, it's like I don't really have power over all of the things that I may be experiencing in my life. I don't have control over those things. But as they show up, I could see that whatever decision that I've made, and if that decision didn't serve my best and highest good, and I learned from that, now I know how to make a different decision. And
Mm-hmm.
even when that doesn't work, I know that everything must change. And so eventually, if I'm willing to step out in faith, whatever it is that I'm experiencing will be resolved over time.
Mm-hmm.
I really believe that that's part of the reason why we're here,
Mm-hmm.
is to resolve those things that we may still yet be experiencing that are not in our best high and highest good. And then having the ability to correct those things. I think a lot of times it is about the relationships that I have with others, the people that can help me see the denial and the fear. Those are places that I can go back into and I can pour some love. I like that term you used. Pour some loving energy into those circumstances and situations. and bring myself out of whatever it might be that I am repeating, expecting different results.
Mm-hmm.
I can actually make a decision now based on the information that I gained from whatever decisions I've made to move forward. I think that's what gives me a lot of confidence today.
Mm.
That am I really making a mistake? The only mistake
Right.
I'm making is if I don't learn from the situation, if I'm not asking the universe, what is this bringing me? What can I learn, from this experience? So gratitude has given me an opportunity to see that if I keep coming back, even to the same situations and circumstances, I can remember um, being in situations where I didn't do well on a test, but I kept coming back. I kept learning from the experiences that I considered to be mistakes and gained the ability over time to actually solve and resolve whatever the problem may have been. I have a spiritual technique too that I use. I call it, well, it's sort of like engineering, and it's a combination of engineering and combining my intuition or spirit.
Mm.
And I'll put something in my consciousness, something that may be a challenge, and I'll plant that seed before I go to sleep. And when I wake up in the morning, a lot of times those issues have been resolved. You know, um, I'm grateful. I call it imagineering. I've heard other people use that term since I came up with it uh,
Mm.
a few years ago. But I think it's a tool that we can use to resolve issues that have maybe um, some things that we've repeated over and over again, and without resolution. That's the way to resolve it, involving spirit into the process.
Mm.
So these things, as it relates to building confidence, the more successful I am, the more things that I can remember, because we all have these things that we are actually successful in, but many times don't acknowledge. But if I can remember the successes in my life and also understand the ability that I have to use whatever is showing up to bring me to a higher level of consciousness around um, what I'm experiencing. The people show up whenever I ask that question of the universe, the people show up, the situations show up, the circumstances show up. It's amazing. I can do it through prayer and meditation. It's a wonderful way to really use gratitude to understand how life works. There's a lot of books too that I read, a lot of spiritual heroes and sheroes that have given me some insight into this. Dr. Wayne Dyer is one of those people that I can
Mm.
think offhand. What happens when gratitude is a way of life, a lifestyle?
Mm. Well, um, and as a part of me just has to double back to something that you said in the last question too, because I think what you are naming, no mistakes and always lessons, I think is one of the most valuable things human beings can process and really kind of hold. that if we see that there's nothing that has happened in our lives, and I would even go further to say failures, right? It's like if we can see that everything that's happening in our lives, if we use it as information, can support us in moving in a new direction. What was painful about the perceived failure? What felt so denigrating about that experience? Okay, I'm going to go in this new direction. I'm going to take a step in this new direction. And that step is going to take me to another step. Oprah has this thing about next best step, the next best step. And I think that we can take failures, mistakes, and the things that felt really hard and painful and choose a new direction, one step at a time. And that one step and the other step and the other step can lead us to where we ultimately would love to be. And in that, gratitude for that if we can find the like, oh, what I'm grateful for is not the hurt necessarily or like how hard this felt, but the information that it gave me, that I want something else for myself, I think is like the thing, right? This information that's going to serve me is what I'm grateful for, and not necessarily for the dark place that we felt we were in. So I just felt like, let me say that.
Okay.
And then your question about, can you say that last question again, Maurice?
What happens when gratitude is a way of life or
Yes.
a
I think for me, what I've noticed about gratitude being a way of life, it doesn't then feel like a foreign concept to find gratitude in the midst of all things. As a matter of fact, when gratitude becomes a way of life, it's also maybe to the rest of people watching you a little annoying that you're going to work to find the thing to be grateful for almost immediately. So, for example, my car was vandalized at BART in July. And I walked out of the BART station, went up in the elevator, and had a feeling of kind of like something's not right, even as I was like heading upstairs. And I came to the car, and the car is broken open, like things are all over the place. I could tell the ignition had been damaged. And like one of the first thoughts I had was, so grateful no one's hurt. I'm so grateful I'm okay.
Yes.
You know? And it appears to me that, everything material is kind of in shambles right now. But, I'm grateful that, I get to, like leave from this place and figure out what comes next, For me, that was just, what came next? A bunch of people showed up for me. I had a friend who came and sat with me while I waited on the police and the different things. I had another group of friends that showed up, and I was having the hardest time because it was on the 5th floor of this parking lot, a BART parking lot, having the hardest time getting a tow truck driver to come up. They couldn't because of the clearance. And a friend of mine decided to just try to drive the car down. The car couldn't start, but he's like, let me try. And I'm telling you, where I went was, I'm so grateful for the people who showed up in this moment to support me in all the ways so that we could get the process moving of getting the car dealt with. But immediately I was able to be present with the things that I could be grateful for. And I think that's the thing, is that I know that I could have come out there and been like, oh, look at this, my entire day is gone. Like, oh, I'm so pissed. And, I could be like down the rabbit hole of all the reasons, and this is going to set me back how many weeks, and I won't have a car, and what's going to happen. I could definitely do that, right? But I was like, you know what? Let me just breathe. Here I am. I'm good. Everything's good on me. This friend shows up, that friend, I'm so grateful. I have these friends who care about me, and I just really did that. And, that's what I do. And I think it takes the sting out for me in a lot of ways. And it also kind of like multiplies. So, like I said, folks showed up and showed up. And then there was a car I could drive, and then this and that, like it just kind of kept going. And so, yeah, I feel like it shifts our lives because we allow another possibility in.
And, I have to say, as a person who knows you personally, that the energy that you put out in the community, whether it's at our spiritual community, through the Centers for Spiritual Living, or in your own personal life, you are very supportive of others. And that attitude of gratitude is what we notice about you. Speaking from, the perspective of how the community sees you and how that is expressed through me, I'm really grateful that you gave us an opportunity to hear about some of the ways that you practice gratitude today. And I want to be respectful of your time. Yeah. And I understand, how important this topic is to you and also to me. And it is something that is very personal, but at the same time, it is something that is very universal, and we get an opportunity to come together and celebrate the gratitude that has brought us to this place. I'm also in that place. I'm grateful for everything that has happened. And as you know, I've dealt with life-threatening illness and, the diagnosis of those illnesses. But what I'm also recognizing is that I am in such a state of gratitude that I understand what it takes for me to vibrate, so to speak, at a level higher than the dis-ease that I may be experiencing in my life in whatever way it's showing up. So thank you for being one of those lights and a mirror for me and the rest of the community, and that example that you spoke of. You truly are an example of the light.
Oh,
I would say you're a light worker in the community.
Thank you. Thank you. And, I feel the same way about you. And, it's interesting because maybe it's like the light recognizes the light. I just, know that you're doing some amazing things in the world, literally globally. And you bring that light with you wherever you go. So I'm so grateful for our friendship and for knowing you, Maurice.
And I'm grateful for the path that led us to meet, to come together, and understand and learn from each other. That is such a gift. So when I think about people who have made their transitions, I look at the gift, as you said, that they brought over time into my life and your life and our lives. And it's just a way of recognizing just how powerful gratitude can be. Thank you, Damali.
Thank you, Maurice.
I'm going to end it here.
All right.
And have a wonderful day, wonderful rest.
All right, you too. And do let me know when it's up.
Okay.
All right.
I'll have it edited soon.
All right. Take good care.
All right. Thank you for listening. I'm grateful for the opportunity to give you an insight into how we may practice these principles in such a way that freedom comes to each of us. It's a commitment that I hope each of you can make to this practice that I know has set me and others free from the chaos and the confusion. Thanks for listening.